Right.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the MMA Corner post-fight recap. As tonight we give you our thoughts and recap what was UFC Fox 12 Lawler versus Brown. As always, tonight's episode is brought to you by Battle Bomb, the only pain reliever with the knockout power. BattleBomb.com. Check them out. Uh, Guys, you hear me preach about that stuff all the time. I use it routinely. Uh, it is great. Anyone who trains, fights, whatever, rub yourself down with some of that stuff, and trust me,
Rub
you will feel
yourself.
the effects. Not like that, but yes. Uh,
I mean,
Audio for
if
tonight's
that part
episode.
of your body is damaged, in theory, you know what I mean? For whatever reason.
I guess so, and that can't happen. Audio for tonight's episode is powered by Soul, Power, Clarity, Comfort. Soul Electronics, get you some. Again, you guys see me wearing these all the time. I have another set that I take with me to work. Plugs into my phone, plugs into my iPad, my iPod, uh, my computer at work. Love them. They're comfortable. They're excellent. Check them out. Soul Electronics. Want to welcome the newest sponsor to the show, Bony Aside. Go to the MMAcorner.com. You can check out their ad right there on the side. It's got Vitor Belfort's mug right there. You can't miss it. I recently started taking these products, guys, and let me tell you, they're legit. They're the bomb. They don't pay me to say this. They don't care whether or not I promote their product or not. But I want you guys to know that they truly are one of the best at what they do. There's all kinds of products that you can get from them. I do suggest go check it out. Because again, if you're not, you don't even need to be an athlete. If you just want to be healthy, they got the stuff for you. Bony Aside, check them out. All right, without any further advertising babble, let's move right on. I am Josh Davis, your host, alongside featured columnist at the MMAcorner.com and my co-host, Eric Reiner. Eric, how you doing this evening, brother?
You know, Josh, as viewers of our shows will know, and as you certainly know, I'm an engaged man, very much in love with my fiance, but occasionally I like to step out and join two women. That is, New Glarus Two Women, a delicious brew from the makers of all the New Glarus products available here in Wisconsin. It's been a fantastic night of fights, Josh, and I'm happy to join you here tonight to talk about it.
Well, real quickly before we get into the fights, I gotta ask: is that Wisconsin only?
Unfortunately, fortunately for me, unfortunately for everybody out there in MMA Corner wrap-up show land, it is not available outside of Wisconsin. You can try to smuggle some if you want, but I take no responsibility for the consequences, potentially, of those actions. But come and visit Wisconsin and drink as much as you want.
I'm going to have to do that, and I do recommend everyone who's out in Wisconsin, that general area within the States Drive, whatever, go get you some Two Women. Now, main card. Oh my God, guys, I don't know what to say about tonight's fight. Thursday night was not a good night for me. I'm just going to be real honest. I won 50%, and to go 50%, well, that's just not good enough. That's garbage on my part. So I apologize to everybody. I apologize for picking losers. No, just kidding. I do apologize for getting the fights wrong. It is what it is. But
Whatever.
was that was that 50?
I went 50%, and I'm not apologizing to anybody. You know why? Because we do our best to break these things down. You can never really predict what's going to happen. I mean, it's not like folks. I hope folks aren't taking my word when they're betting their hard-earned dollars on these fights, because folks, that is an exercise in stupidity, ladies and gentlemen. Because when we're only batting 50%, we're going to lose 50% of your money. So, just for entertainment purposes only, you guys.
Exactly. And with that being said, guys, if my picks were that good, I'd be doing a lot better off than I am right now. But in all seriousness, no. Thursday night, I picked Thompson, Guida, Johnson, and Lawler. And so let's get right into it. Bobby Green defeated Josh Thompson. Split decision. Before I ramble on, Eric, give us your thoughts on the fight. A lot of people screaming robbery, that kind of stuff.
No.
Honestly,
Nope.
give us your thoughts.
Well, it's one of those fights that all three rounds are kind of tough to score because there wasn't a lot of decisive action. And here's what I mean by that. There were very few, like there's those certain moments in a fight that a fighter clearly takes an advantage in a round. That is, a knockout. I'm sorry, a knockdown. Obviously, a knockout would do it, but a knockdown, a takedown, a significant combination that seems to hurt the opponent. Those more obvious things, and those are pretty much absent from this first fight. It was a good back and forth battle, and I mean, if talking shit to your opponent, pardon my French, talking smack to your opponent during a fight counted for points, Bobby Green would have won this one like 30-21 or something like that. Because pretty much every time Josh Thompson threw something, whether it landed or not, Bobby Green was talking about it. So, I thought Josh Thompson would have a much easier time with Bobby Green than he did. I would say that Josh Thompson really lost this fight more than Bobby Green won it. Again, there wasn't really any decisive moments in this fight that I would point to that said this is the moment that Bobby Green took control of this contest, and really brought it home for himself. It was just more that, I was expecting, because Josh Thompson has had such success throughout his career, and particularly recently against a guy like Nate Diaz, who's notoriously difficult to finish, and Josh Thompson made it look like a simple thing to do. I expected him to come out and kind of blitz through Bobby Green as sort of a late-ish replacement, someone, who is ranked a little bit lower in the lightweight division. And that certainly didn't end up being the case. Josh Thompson kind of allowed Bobby Green to control the center of the octagon for the majority of the fight. Didn't really have the opportunity to put together a lot of really dangerous seeming strikes. Didn't really score much in the way of takedowns or get too much of an advantage in the way of grappling. So, I thought that this was Josh Thompson's fight that he lost as opposed to one that Bobby Green won. And I guess that's a nice way of saying that there wasn't a tremendous amount of action in this one. I could see where the judges may have scored it for Thompson, but I personally had it 29-28 for Green, with Green taking the first and third rounds and Thompson taking the second. Again, a very close fight, and one without a lot of truly decisive moments to point to. But, Josh Thompson taking the loss, certainly going to hurt his credibility in the lightweight division, again, given his age, given his the mileage that he's put on his body. But I think Bobby Green scoring this victory definitely puts the spotlight more brightly on him. I don't think that this necessarily immediately launches him into the title picture, but certainly beating a guy like Josh Thompson is something to be very proud of as a fellow lightweight fighter in the UFC. So I think Bobby Green, certainly has an interesting future ahead of him. I want to say this is his 7th straight win or something like that. He's won a number of fights in a row at this point. So I think we'll see him definitely take on another member of the lightweight top 5 for his next fight. And then if he wins that one, we could see him sooner rather than later in the title picture in the UFC's lightweight division.
Well, first off, I agree with you on a lot of things. Second off, I don't want to take anything away from Bobby Green, because a victory over Josh Thompson in any style is huge. I mean, Josh is one tough SOB, and when Josh is on point, he's one of those guys that when he's there and he's firing on all cylinders, he's one of the best in the division. But the point you made about Josh Thompson losing this fight as opposed to Bobby Green winning it, I think is key. I think that's the fact of the matter. It's almost like Josh Thompson didn't watch any film on Mr. Green or didn't realize what he was up against, because he didn't do any of the Josh Thompson style of things to win this fight. But again, that's also one of the knocks that people have always had on Josh Thompson when he has something on the line. I mean, because if he wins this fight, like we were talking about Thursday, it's possibly him and Donald Cerrone fighting for a title shot. So when he has something on the line, he is kind of underperformed. Take Gilbert Melendez fights out of the equation. but in just other fights that have
Sure.
meaning to get to a title shot, that kind of stuff, he's always underperformed. And tonight was the same way. And like you said, I think he lost this fight more than Bobby Green went out, laid down an ass whoop, and put his stamp on Josh Thompson and took the victory. Because, obviously he didn't do anything like that. So I agree 100%. But I don't want to take anything away from Bobby. A victory is a victory, and kudos to him. And I think you're right 100%. Is he ready for a title shot? No. Is he ready for title? Is he ready to be in the mix, as Dana likes to call it? No. But one or two more quality wins, and absolutely he should be in the mix. So
let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question, Josh. You mentioned Cerrone versus Josh Thompson, which we mentioned in our preview show for this card last week. What do you think about Cerrone versus Bobby Green?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and while I certainly would not be opposed to the fight, I will say this. If you're Donald Cerrone, why do you take this fight? I mean, what do you have to gain from beating Bobby Green? No disrespect to Bobby Green, but he's not going to get you one step closer to a title shot. And if, for some reason, you lose this fight, then you lost everything that you've been working for. It's a no-win situation for Donald. So if I'm Donald Cerrone, it's not a fight that I mean, I'm not going to turn it down because I'm Donald Cerrone. I don't turn down fights, but it's just not one that I want to take. I would rather take somebody ahead of me so I can continue to climb. But if you're asking me as just a straight-up fan, I would love the fight. I think they match up very well against each other. I think a fight like that, because Donald's not going to sit back in ways that Thompson did, I think they would push each other and bring out the best. So I'm all for it. I would love to see it happen. I just don't know. I just don't know that we will.
Sure. Okay.
With that being said, let's move right along to another fight that I got wrong. Congratulations to you, Mr. Reiner. You did pick this one right. On Thursday, I expected Clay Guida to carpenderize, to Guidaize, to do everything that he does to Joseph Benavidez. But I think tonight, again, like Eric said on Thursday, tonight shows that Clay, as much as I love him, as much as I love to watch him bounce around and do all the things he does, he doesn't have the same pep in the step that he did. He's on the I find it hard to say that he's on the downside of his career, but I think he probably is starting to make that downhill slide, at least as far as physical attributes go, because he's definitely not the same guy that we saw 4 or 5 years ago. And hats off to Dennis. He went in there, he got the job done, he got the victory, and not only did he get the victory, he got the finish. And finishing Clay Guida, that's not an easy thing to do. So congratulations, kid.
Yes, is there an echo in here? Because the things you're saying about Clay Guida sound an awful lot like the things I said about Clay Guida on Thursday night before this fight.
Did you not hear me? Hold on. Did you not hear me? I gave you props.
I know.
This is exactly what you said on Thursday.
I know.
I mean, are you sure we're not engaged? Because I swear I had this conversation with my wife just earlier, a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
right. I'm wrong.
I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I got something back here that I need to. Oh, there it is. Okay, we're good. Again, this to me was not so much that Clay Guida was losing his step, because as fighters get older, that's just something that happens. But I think people really underestimated Dennis Bermudez here. This guy is a truly fantastic all-around fighter, and right away in the fight we saw that he can certainly keep up with the pace of Clay Guida, and in fact outpace Clay Guida. He cut him off in the cage several times, kind of trapped him against the fence to prevent Clay Guida from keeping up with that sort of high volume, high movement offense, real escapability that Clay Guida likes to employ in a lot of his fights. So Dennis Bermudez put together just a brilliant strategy for this fight, and we saw that not only did he outstrike Clay Guida and really take care of him on the feet, but then once it got to the ground, it was really no contest. I mean, Clay Guida is a a pretty good grappler in his own right. But Dennis Bermudez made him look like an amateur. I had this one solidly for Dennis Bermudez, 10-9 after the first round, and it really seemed like he was giving Clay Guida trouble. So, I'm actually looking at my Twitter feed for my notes to just recall what I thought about each of these fights, because I kind of kept track of all of them during it, and I just said, I thought that Clay Guida could be in trouble after that first one, and sure enough, Bermudez kind of continued his onslaught in the second round and was able to finish Clay Guida by submission. Obviously, Clay Guida wasn't too hurt because he got up, did a couple of, defeat laps, because they're not victory laps, but he sort of ran around the cage a few times after he tapped out to Dennis Bermudez's rear naked choke. So obviously he wasn't hurt too badly, but just an excellent strategy employed by Dennis Bermudez. Really took care of him on the feet, and then once it got to the ground, it was really no contest.
Yeah, and my hat's off to Dennis Bermudez. He has certainly won me over, to be real honest. Obviously he was on the Ultimate Fighter and that kind of stuff, and we all got to see, I guess, the potential that he had. But now he's actually showing that he has skills and that he's legit and that he belongs. And obviously you saw this in previous fights, because you had him winning this fight. I knew he had it in him. I just didn't think that he'd be able to get it done. But the one thing that he showed me tonight is he's a whole lot, either he or his coaching staff is a whole lot smarter than I gave him credit for, because I did not think they would be able to put in the game plan to outpace Clay Guida, and that's exactly what they did. And you mentioned it. They did that by having him cut him off, having him corner, do all these kind of things so Clay Guida can't control. And as far as the game plan, when it was perfect, and they executed it perfectly, and again, they got the submission victory. So hats off to Dennis Bermudez. He's now on my radar. I'll definitely be giving him the props and respect that he deserves. Not what I thought he deserved, but what he actually deserves.
Where do you think this puts Clay Guida now in the UFC? I mean, obviously he's still not kind of in retirement age, but do you think this fight could be an argument for him kind of leaving the contenders picture and kind of staying in sort of the well-known veteran category for a handful of fights? Like, where do you think this places him now?
I love Clay Guida, and as much as I hate to say it, I really don't have a problem saying it, especially after tonight's fight. He's a gatekeeper. He's the gatekeeper to the division. That's where he stands now.
That's probably true.
Coming out with the MMA Corners rankings, which we will be doing here next week. I will, for me, Clay Guida will probably be 10, 11, somewhere in there. He's going to be to me, he's now the gatekeeper of the division. He's the gatekeeper of that top 10, top 12 area. If you really want to crack that area and start making a title run, it goes through Clay Guida as far as I'm concerned. That's where I think he stands. He still has the fight left in him. I think there's still some good fights out there for him, but where he stands, he's the gatekeeper. All right, moving right along. I don't think anybody was surprised by this next fight. No. And I don't want to be rude or disrespectful to anybody, but if you were surprised by the outcome of this fight, it's probably because you don't know much about the sport, or you're still living 15 years ago back in Pride heydays, whatever.
Or you're Brazilian.
Or you're Brazilian. That's another one. So, but other than those three,
that's not an insult. I mean, no. It's not a bad thing to be Brazilian. I'm just saying that's one of the reasons you could have thought that Rogério had a chance in this fight.
Exactly. So take those three things away, and pretty much everyone following the sport knew that what was going to happen was actually going to happen. I'm pretty sure that Little Nog, deep down inside, probably knew that this was going to be the outcome for him.
Man, if that's the case, how fucking scary must that have been to go to the cage just to know you're basically walking to your execution, figuratively speaking. You know what I mean?
Well, personally, I've managed fighters. I've trained with fighters, and I've had my ass whooped a time or two in my day. And there are times. I mean, everyone believes, all right, if I do this thing or this, that, or the other, I can win. And it's not just fighting. I mean, you play Little League football, and there's always that team that's better than you, and all right, even on our best day, we're still not as good as they are. Um, Honestly, I'm sure that's kind of what Lil Nog was thinking here. All right, unless I pull something out of my ass, I'm probably not winning this fight. And
Like a
anyone,
wrench.
yeah, exactly, a wrench. And if people don't think that fighters, actually think about that stuff, you're wrong, because they
That's
don't.
why they pat them down before the fights in case they have any ass wrenches.
Well, monkey wrench, ass wrench, whatever.
That's also something that Dude Wipes can help you with is ass wrench. It's on their website.
Yes, it is. So I don't think that there was any surprise, but I just want to say this before we move on. How good does Rumble Johnson look right now? Seriously. I mean, this guy is a beast. His hand speed is excellent. His power is frickin'. The guy's in there swinging cinder blocks. Uh, I can't say enough about him. I am on Team Brumbleweight. There is no question about it. Uh, Now that he is with Glenn Robinson and the Black Zillions, and Glenn's got his head on straight, and Anthony's doing the things that he needs to be doing, uh, this guy is vicious. He is scary. Do I think he's going to beat John Jones right now? No. But do I think he could in a little while? Quite possibly. So I'm really excited for the future of Anthony Johnson. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I totally agree. The one reservation I have about Anthony Johnson is that, he's thus far has shown himself to be a very devastating striker, but, so was Glover Teixeira. And John Jones kind of took care of that business pretty quick and not pretty quick, but, seemingly pretty easily. Mauricio Shogun, who also a devastating striker, and Jones didn't seem to have much of a problem with him, and that was a few years ago. So I don't think that there's any fighter in the world right now that can dispatch John Jones and take his title from him. I think Rumble Johnson is a fantastic person to put against him, though, especially if he's able to win maybe one more fight. The one that I'm seeing a lot on Twitter is Rumble versus Gustafsson, when Gustafsson is healthy, and the winner of that one getting the next title shot. And I think some people might have a problem with that because Gustafsson was sort of promised the next title shot, got hurt. So obviously Cormier has to step in at this point. But I do think that putting together Rumble versus Gustafsson, I mean, that's a main event right there. Or at the very least a co-main event for a pay-per-view card. So that's the fight that I would like to see happen because I do believe that Rumble Johnson, given his history and given the fact that he's beaten two pretty good guys, but I'd really like to see him probably win one more fight. Because, frankly, and again, we're not trying to disrespect anybody here, I don't think a win over a 38-year-old, hasn't been active in a whole year, Little Nog, is as impressive as, say, a victory over Alexander Gustafsson, who's, kind of entering the prime of his athletic career would be. So that's the fight I'd like to see next. Obviously, Johnson looked just incredible, vicious in the cage. I don't think anybody really questioned, as you just said, Josh, I don't think anybody questioned this outcome here unless they were really lying to themselves. And as soon as the fight started, my fiance was sitting with me and she was kind of doing something on her phone. And I said, just put your phone down. This will take like 30 seconds, and you'll be able to see some destruction. And sure enough, like Johnson landed that uppercut, and you could see right then that that Little Nog was like, oh, this is not good. And Johnson didn't stop from there. And, we saw how it ended, and it was not pretty for Little Nog.
No, it was not. And, obviously, A fight that everyone would love to see is Rashad Evans versus Anthony Johnson. Obviously, that's not going to happen. They're
Right.
teammates. Not only are they teammates, they're buddies. That fight's not going to happen. Uh, we're not going to see Rashad and Gustafsson. So if Gustafsson is not going to get the immediate, title shot upon his return, then yeah, the perfect fight is Rumble Johnson with the winner of that and getting the winner or the champion at that time, whatever, however you want to term it. So yeah, I'm all for it. I'd love to see it, and I agree that fight is a main event. I would pay for it as a main event, but if you wanted to be super cool to me, make it a co-main event and do an even better fight as the main event, I'm not going to tell you how to run your business here. You guys do your thing.
There are not many non-title fights anymore that I think are worthy of purchase in a pay-per-view main event, and I think that this is definitely one of them, though. Just because of the excitement that both of these guys have brought to the octagon and the stakes that would be, at stake.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Because you're right. These days, as far as pay-per-view goes, there's not a whole lot of non-title fights as the main event. But I would certainly take this one. I like that matchup. I think it would.
I agree. I agree.
I think it'd be a great fight. All right, let's move right on to the main event. Eric, why don't you start us off on this one?
Sure. Well, I predicted Brown would win here, and I think I said it on the show on Thursday. I was more of a heart pick than a head pick. I think deep down I knew that Robbie Lawler was the more skilled fighter. But to me, Matt Brown has exhibited the sort of toughness and sort of fighting spirit that I thought would be very difficult to overcome physically in the cage. I had a good feeling, contrary to what a lot of people thought, that this fight would go to decision because we've seen Matt Brown take a lot of damage. We've seen Robbie Lawler take a lot of damage, and I think at this point in their careers, they simply refuse to let another person finish them physically, particularly by knockout or technical knockout. So I really thought that this fight was going to go to decision, and obviously it did. It wasn't as exciting and explosive a fight as I think a lot of people were expecting, and I certainly fall into that category. I mean, when we think about the ideal Matt Brown versus Robbie Lawler, it's like 5 rounds of Don Fry versus the guy whose name just escapes my mind right now, but when they're, that pride fight with those two when they're basically just hockey punching each other for like a minute and a half. I think a lot of people expected 3 or 5 rounds of that when we were talking about the level of violence that Matt Brown and Robbie Lawler have put on display. And, that simply wasn't the case. And honestly, I think that was kind of an unrealistic expectation by a lot of people because, you can't go, not even a guy like Nick Diaz could go in, with the cardio level that he has and just flail like, a lot of people were expecting for 25 minutes. That's just not realistic. So I think that, a more reserved pace was first of all, something that people should have expected a little bit more. But because they didn't, the first 4 rounds not being the absolute total slugfests that a lot of people, again, I think unfairly expected, probably drew a lot of disappointment. Obviously in my ideal eye, I too would have liked to see them just basically stand in the pocket and trade. But, instead it was a bit more of a strategic fight. I thought that Robbie Lawler definitely won round 1, although that was a very close one because Robbie Lawler at the very beginning of the fight, it seemed like, Josh, your prediction on Thursday was going to come true, not necessarily of the body shot specificity, but of the fact that Robbie Lawler seemed to be the more technically proficient striker immediately. But then, Matt Brown landed a couple shots and Robbie Lawler stepped back a few, and you could almost see Matt Brown's demeanor change in thinking like instead of, oh shit, I got to cover up and prevent myself from getting knocked out, it's like, oh, my strikes are actually hurting this guy. And at that point, he started to move forward a little bit. At the end of the first round, Robbie Lawler kind of regained his composure and I think took the round. And at that point, it was pretty obvious, I thought, that Robbie Lawler, regardless of whether or not this fight went the distance, that he was probably going to win unless Matt Brown pulled out some sort of amazing, kind of come from behind Scott Smith type flash knockout of Robbie Lawler. Obviously, Matt Brown won round 2. That was a close round as well, but I thought Matt Brown did a better job of cage control, and I think he landed a few more strikes in that round as well. But for the rest of the fight, it was pretty much all Robbie Lawler. He didn't dominate Matt Brown by any stretch of the imagination, but he certainly got the better of each of the last three rounds, I thought. The 5th round, unlike the first 4, was sort of the style that a lot of people were expecting of the entire fight. Matt Brown at that point, I think, knew he was down at least 2 rounds to 3. I'm sorry. He knew that he was at least tied with Robbie Lawler, if not down 3 rounds to 1. So he knew that he either had to finish the fight or score a very decisive win, round victory in the 5th round. And so he seemed to turn it on, particularly in the beginning portion of the 5th round. But Robbie Lawler was able to withstand that. He certainly was able to return fire in the 5th round and finish the round very strong, I think, and that convinced most of the judges that Robbie Lawler had taken that round as well. I had this fight scored 49-46 for Lawler. Both fighters were very impressive. Robbie Lawler is obviously going to get the next title shot again at Johnny Hendricks, and I think that's very deserving given how close their first fight was and given how well he's performed in the fights since that welterweight title contest. Matt Brown, on the other hand, I think given the fact that he hung in there for 25 minutes with a guy as ruthless, no pun intended, as Robbie Lawler. Actually, you know what? Pun very much intended. Ruthless as Robbie Lawler. I think he's going to again find himself face-to-face against another top 5 guy. I think there's a pretty moderate list of guys that you could put against Matt Brown in his next fight. To wit, Carlos Condit is a name that I've seen people put out there on Twitter. I think Tyron Woodley or Dong Hyun Kim, depending on who wins that fight, would be good next opponents for Matt Brown. I think you could put Rory McDonald against Matt Brown. And you know what? Here's kind of a dark horse contender that I think a lot of people would really love to see, myself included, against Matt Brown. Recent UFC re-signee Nick Diaz versus Matt Brown. I think, to me, that fight is as appealing as, if not more appealing than a fight between Nick Diaz and Anderson Silva. And perhaps I'm in the minority there, but here's why I say that. It would be an infinitely more relevant fight to both of their careers and to the UFC generally speaking if Matt Brown and Nick Diaz were to square off in the welterweight division, as opposed to a super fight, which sure, it would be fun, it would sell some pay-per-views, but Nick Diaz versus Anderson Silva doesn't really mean anything unless Nick Diaz is prepared to move to middleweight full-time, or at least try to contend for that title, as well as perhaps contend in the welterweight division. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Here's the point. Even in losing, Matt Brown showed a tremendous amount of fighting spirit, and again, that's a phrase that I've used a lot. But I think few fighters embody that sense of fighting, or that notion of fighting spirit better than Matt Brown. He's gone out and finished so many of his opponents, particularly recently. I want to say 5 in a row leading to this fight, and certainly went out on his shield against Robbie Lawler. But in the end, Robbie Lawler, more impressive tonight in his performance, certainly more technically proficient, certainly showed why he is the number 1, or at least before this was considered the number 1 contender to Johnny Hendricks' belt. And I personally can't wait for the rematch between Hendricks and Robbie Lawler.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that rematch too. Now, this fight did not go the way that I thought it would. I mean, obviously, I picked Robbie to win, and he did that. But I did think that Robbie would be able to get the finish in the first round. I did say that he'd be able to pound on Matt Brown's gut and again show the world how weak it is and exploit him there. Not the case. He was able to use his more proficient and technical striking. And again, anyone who thought that the boxer, which is Robbie Lawler, wasn't going to have the better striking against Matt Brown, who's, if we're just being honest, is just a brawler, was clueless about how this sport really is. I mean, Robbie Lawler has arguably the most technical stand-up out of anybody in the 170-pound division. And so I did know that was going to play a huge part in this. And then now the fact that he can stop a takedown and he throws head kicks and that kind of stuff, you know, he's starting to evolve, and he had more ways to win this fight and less ways to lose this fight than Matt Brown did. And
Yeah.
I just figured that, again, Robbie would be able to use his superior tool set to win this fight, and that's what happened. I didn't think it would go to a decision. I thought that, you know, somebody, whether it was Matt Brown or Robbie Lawler, I thought that one of them would get finished. Guys get tired, they're throwing heavy hands, and, you know, in the late third round when you're breathing heavy and your jaw's hanging open, it's not too hard to get knocked out. So I thought somebody would get finished. I was wrong. Went to a decision, and, you know, obviously Robbie Lawler's getting the next title shot, which is great. He deserves it. As far as Matt Brown goes, though, I honestly don't think this loss hurts Matt Brown at all, really. I mean, he lost to the number one ranked guy in the division. There's no shame in that. He was the heavy underdog going into this fight. He went in there, fought his ass off. It's not like he laid down and took an ass whooping, because he didn't. He was in there fighting. He was trying to win. He was doing his thing. I don't think this fight's going to hurt him. I'm with you. I love the Nick Diaz idea. I just don't. I think the UFC is really going to push the Anderson Silva fight, which we will talk about tomorrow on this show. So make sure you tune in for that. But in addition to Nick Diaz from Matt Brown, another fight I'd like to see Matt Brown in would be Hector Lombard. I think that would be pretty exciting. Obviously, Hector has heavy hands, and he's going to want to come in and bang. And Matt Brown, being who Matt Brown is, I think it would be an exciting fight. On paper, I like the Rory McDonald idea. However, in actuality, come on, guys, we know how Rory's going to fight. He's going to dance around and try and jab Matt Brown to death. He's not going to go in there and fight him like we want to see. He's going to go in there and try and outpoint him and get a W, and that's not going to be exciting. So while on paper, I'd love to see the fight, and in actuality, we know what Freese is going to have Rory McDonald doing. It's going to be total game plan. He's not going to fight him. He's going to outpoint him, and I got to be honest, I don't want to see that.
Jake Ellenberger, one other guy I thought might match up well against Matt Brown. Jake Ellenberger.
Yeah, I would love to see Matt Brown and Jake Ellenberger's UFC career. I think that would be great. No offense to Jake. I just, again, anyone who's watched the show knows that I think Ellenberger is a little bit overrated. Why, I certainly think he belongs in the UFC. I don't think he's a top 10 guy. I think Matt Brown would probably put it on him. But yeah, it's another exciting fight I'd like to see. All right, guys, UFC on Fox 12, Lawler versus Brown. A lot of decisions on this card, but all in all, it was pretty exciting. I mean, the Fight Pass prelims were solid. The main card prelims were solid, and then the main card itself delivered as well. So another free night of events provided by the UFC. What more can you ask for? Eric, final thoughts on tonight?
Yeah, you know, what I always try to think about for UFC on Fox cards is how they came off to people who have never watched MMA before or who are relatively unfamiliar with it. And I guess the only thing that the UFC would really have to worry about here is that first fight between Thompson and Green drove the fans away who, you know, perhaps were not willing to sit through the other three fights. In that respect, I suppose they could have put Anthony Rumble Johnson versus Antonio Rogerio Nogueira first on the card to be like, see, this stuff's really exciting. But I think overall, this card probably played well to casual fans. You know, again, ignoring the first fight, which wasn't the most exciting, you had Dennis Bermudez, you know, come in and take out a guy like Clay Guida, who always puts on an exciting fight, and that was an excellent contest. Then you had Anthony Rumble Johnson come in and put on, you know, some serious explosion, and then, you know, what ended up being a pretty decent fight between Lawler and Brown, particularly that fifth round. I think that fifth round did a really great job of capping off the card, and as much as I as much as some people probably hate it when I compare MMA to pro wrestling, you know, in a good pro wrestling match, it starts off kind of slow, and then there's sort of a rising action, and at the end, there's all kinds of, you know, stuff going on back and forth until one guy wins. And that's pretty much how this 5-round fight played out. You know, the first two rounds were fairly exciting. Then, you know, rounds 3 and 4 were, you know, Robbie Lawler definitely had control, but again, there weren't a ton of moments where you would say, yeah, Robbie Lawler really took care of him in that round. And then round 5 was just crazy climax to the fight because you knew both fighters really were going for it. And then, you know, Robbie Lawler ended up taking the victory. So I think a great card put together by the UFC, and you know, one that they can be proud of, that they put in front of potentially a bunch of new fans.
You know, really the only thing the UFC, in my mind, could have done to make this card better, to draw in new fans, is to have thrown Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano on this card. And I say that, you know, tongue in cheek, obviously, but this card, for what they were trying to do, was that solid. To get in new casual fans, all of that kind of stuff, this card was that solid. And really the only thing they could have done to make it better was to throw a high-profile fight like that on there.
Right.
So the UFC should definitely be proud. I'm sure that they're again going to continue to get new viewers that they wouldn't be getting without having these events on Fox. So it's definitely serving the purpose for them. And then again, us as fans and media, all that kind of stuff, this was another free event that we got. So, you know, I absolutely am not complaining. Obviously, Anthony Rumble Johnson shined tonight. There's no question about that. Dennis Bermudez on the main card, he was probably my biggest star tonight. He came out, put the smack down on Clay Guida, and really made a name for himself. Big win for Bobby Green, but Bermudez did it better. That's just all there is to it. Hats off to both Matt Brown and Robbie Lawler. Way to give it up for the fans. Now, housekeeping notes, guys. Obviously, UFC 176, which was scheduled to be on August 2nd, has been canceled. Okay, so there's no event next weekend. It's been canceled. Just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. So we will be back Thursday, August 14th, giving you our thoughts and predictions on UFC Fight Night 47, which is Bader versus St. Preux. Then we will be back on August 16th, immediately following the event, to give you post-fight recap. In the meantime, if you can't get enough of us, MMA Corner News Show tomorrow, 12 p.m. Mountain, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. on the West Coast. That's how we do it. And if that's still not enough for you, take your ass over to themmacorner.com. Themmacorner.com, your home for all things MMA.
That's right.
We got you covered. And if for some reason you missed tonight's fights, guess what? We got you covered on that too. Go to themmacorner.com, watch all of the full fight videos. If you missed any part of the action, check them out. They're all right there. themmacorner.com, your home for all things MMA. All right, for Eric Reiner, I'm Josh Davis. Until we see you tomorrow for the MMA Corner News Show, keep living the MMA Corner lifestyle. Peace.